Ayni Institute. Welcome to our share space. My name is Carlos Saavedra, and I will be presenting to you today, welcome, about movement strategy. Okay? Can we take another deep breath, everybody? Deep breath, deep breath. Great. If you don't breathe, you might die. I don't say it, the doctors say it, so it's their recommendation. But welcome, everybody. So we're going to share a little bit about what Ayni is, and then we're going to dive into the presentation, if that's okay. And then at the end, we'll have a space for questions and comments and all the good jazz, so we have a good conversation. Would that be okay with everybody? Yeah. Great. How many of you feel like it's too cold in Boston today? Raise your hands. Great. Oh, how many people feel it's warm in Boston today? Interesting crowd. Some other people have no opinions. This is what the Boston... It's perfect. Normal. All kinds of visions about our Boston winter. Isn't that what a social movement is? A lot of opinions about the same thing. Great. So I want to talk to you a little bit about Ayni first. So we are the Ayni Institute. Ayni means reciprocity in an original language in Peru called Quechua. So we technically are the Reciprocity Institute. And I don't know if you noticed, but we use this symbol in our websites and all those kinds of things. And let me ask you a question. When you want to find the north and you're looking at the stars, what star are you looking for? If you want to navigate, if you're in a boat going to the north, which one do you go to? What star would you look in the sky?
Isn't it called the North Star?
There you go. Very smart. Can we give him another pretzel? Round of applause for him, please. Round of applause.
I think a lot of people are imagining it was a trick question.
It was. No trick questions here. No trick questions. Well, what if you want to get to the south?
Opposite of the North Star.
Well, but if you're in the southern hemisphere, you cannot see the North Star.
Southern Cross.
Great. So the Southern Cross. So the Southern Cross is this. Or what we call in Latin America, La Cruz del Sur. The same thing, right? So this symbol is called La Chacana, and it's a representation on this. Now, this we cannot see from here. And just as the North Star, we cannot see from there. So the reason why we have the symbol is because to understand that even between one world, there's two different ways of viewing life. The way that the South views life and the way the North views life. Does that make some sense? Just a lot of different perspectives. So what are we trying to do at Ayni? I think people build institutes, organizations, movements for a lot of variety of reasons, right? But I would say that most people do it because they're trying to solve a problem. So let me tell you what I think is the problem we're trying to solve. Most people, when we're talking about the problems that we're facing today, say, well, these problems have been going on for a long time, so maybe this problem is because of the last 50 years. I'm sure you heard this. In that we were so great 50 years ago, and now we're bad. Have you heard this before? Some people say, well, it's not 50 years. Some people say it's 500 years. Well, it's not 600 years we're better than, there's all this difference of time. But we at Ayni actually think that the problems that we're facing today, in 2019, cannot be understood by looking at the last 50 or the last 500 years. That we have to at least look at the last 5 to 10,000 years. We've been a species in this world for thousands of years. Yet our analysis of history is this limited. The problems that we're talking about that got us here, the effects, at least this time long. So unless we have what we call a long view perspective, we won't be able to solve the problems of the future. We'll just be reacting and reacting and reacting and reacting. So our institute understands this at the core. Now, when somebody talks about a problem, sometimes we're talking about problems. Pasa.
Excuse me, guys.
No, tranquilo. We have a tax office on the top. Can we give a round of applause to our neighbors at the top? We're a community organization. This is for the video. So when you're looking at problems, you're looking both at the scope, how long, and then you're looking at the depth of the problem. Okay? You're looking at what's really underneath, what's on the root of the problem. Sometimes people say words, but what's underneath the word? What's in the depth of that? And we actually believe through our institute that there's three things. There's three relationships as a species. Okay? Within the different tribes and cultures, whether you're from European descendants, African descendants, from Latin American descendant, from any place, okay? And clearly we know that there's a dominant culture of Westernism, to put it in those terms, right? From wherever you are, we feel like there's been three relationships that as a species, we're abandoning. Okay? And the first relationship is with Mother Earth. We have no context. We're losing it so much. What's our relationship with Mother Earth? We're in a major crisis right now. As all of you know, around climate change, around the climate crisis that affects the whole world. Right now, there's millions of people migrating. There's millions of people dying, directly or indirectly, made by climate change. This is not because today we don't know how to manage. It's not just the oil company. It's not just the capitalism or the accumulation of yesterday or 50 years ago. This is a long problem. This is a relationship we abandon. When we ask people, where does the sun come from? Most people don't even can tell you, young people, where is the east or the west. They cannot tell you what constellations are on the sky. They cannot even make their own food. Our relationship with Mother Earth is not strong. Second, the relationship with abandon is community. With what? Community. A relationship to community.
Okay.
Right now, with the collapse of major religions, religion is not as strong as it used to be 50 years ago. Now there is a humongous sense that life is you. It's you. Me. It's me, that I as an individual alone must solve my own problems. This is insane. A community that needs each other, and a species that would not be able to survive without community believes that individually you can make your own life. This is constant. We've forgotten the rituals. We've forgotten the songs. We've forgotten the healing practices. All that is within community. Community is not easy. I'm not romanticizing your community is good. Doing good community is hard. Okay? But the reason why I say abandonment is because now with trauma, what happens is somebody gets hurt by the family or somebody gets hurt by somebody in the community and they say, well, I cannot trust anybody. Are you following me on this?
Yeah. Yes.
But when we do food, let's say you get food poisoning. You eat at the corner place, you get food poisoning. You get sick, it's completely painful, it's traumatic if you're vomiting and all those things. Does that make sense? But you don't say I must abandon food. You just say that food is toxic. That community arrangement was toxic. I need to have healthier food or healthier relationships. But right now we live in a time where any kind of toxicity in the community is justified by individualism. Okay? I'm not saying that we need to have oppressive communities. That's not what I'm saying. I just want to clarify with that. But I'm saying is that we need to revive the community. It's because we're so far away that everyone in this world, and even in climate change, everyone is thinking they can solve their problems individually. Well, if I move away in their own home by myself and put all the cans of beans on the basement, I will survive. Good luck with that. Or I alone will figure out my own life or my own success. Me. Over and over and over again. Because of this, we have a major crisis of isolation. In UCLA, they have a humongous study about now that in the US we have the largest amounts of households of people living in one person per household. I think we have about 30 million people living in one household. That are individuals living in a household per person. Is insane. There's so much isolation going on in the country that right now they're measuring chronic levels of isolation, and they even call it chronic levels of isolation. That's how alone people feel. And don't matter how much things we can buy, because nothing can replace a hug. Yes?
Do I have permission to record any of what you're saying? I have some friends that could...
Don't worry, we're recording. That's why we're recording the session, so that we can put it online.
Later.
Don't worry. So just sign up your friends. We'll send out a link because I know a lot of people wanted to come but couldn't. Thank you. So that's the second relationship, community. Third, it's a relationship to the ancestors. We come from lineages of thousands of years, whether you're from a major tradition like Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, or you're coming from an indigenous community, or you're coming from a non-affiliated or different particular religions. We come from lines of thousands of generations. Mothers and fathers, people and back. There's all this wisdom that the past has given to us. 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000. Things that people cannot even explain how their people built. People go to Machu Picchu in Peru and they're like, how did they put this rock here? Engineers today cannot even figure it out. They look at Egypt and they don't understand how that happened. They look at the farming. There's so many farming techniques that people are learning from the ancestors from old ways today to remedy with climate change. So much wisdom, yet we abandon it. Because we think this is our own success. We have to create our own wisdom. Well, not the whole lineage. That we're in a continuity with the ancestors to become future ancestors. And because of this abandonment of the ancestors, there's all this knowledge that is being lost. Hundreds of languages are disappearing, indigenous languages, other ways. People are abandoning their traditions, their rituals. Again, because we blame the whole tradition because it hurt us. Tradition is important. Not oppressive, of course, but it's important. Right? So, what should we do? If there's three major relationships that happen, what is it that the Ayni Institute is proposing? Well, what we're proposing is that we need to restore reciprocity in the world. Reciprocity with Mother Earth, reciprocity in our communities, and reciprocity with our ancestors. Why reciprocity? Because reciprocity is about giving and receiving. It's a muscle. It's a muscle of how people share with each other. How much I give you, how much you give me, how do we share? It's the cornerstone of family. Right? When a child is born, the parents are not like, well, why don't you put up your piece? The child dies without us. That's the piece of reciprocity. And when you're older and you need your children to take care of you, you need your children to support you. That is the cycle of reciprocity, without imposition. Right? That's what reciprocity is. So we at Ayni believe that we must restore reciprocity. And we think that unless people talk about reciprocity and understand reciprocity as a concrete relationship, we're never really going to understand social change. It's not just about class dynamics in the context of Marxism. It's not just that. It's not just about being anti-racist. Being anti-racist means nothing. It's like saying you should be untoxic. Well, what does that mean? The opposite of racist is reciprocal. Is that we want to be reciprocal individually and communally. Individually by sharing with others and communally. Then as communities, those debts that have been stolen need to be repaid reciprocally, proactively. That's reciprocity, right? And it starts at the local level. That's why we're bringing a lot of you together with some of our local reciprocity. But also at the global level. And that's what we call global reciprocity. All the tribes, all the major religions, all the major countries, the Pan-Africanists, the Pan-Indigenous, everybody coming together to form a new social contract for the world. That's what it's missing. And again, remember that I'm saying communities, not individuals. Because we need community and safety to negotiate with other communities. That's what it needs. We need to restore the community. We need to inject community with reciprocity. And that's why we're having three proposals. One is to reinvigorate all of our cultures. Every culture needs to be reinvigorated. The reason why we're not as strong is because our cultures are weak. They're not reciprocal enough. That's why toxicity comes into a community, it gets broken apart. The community is not resilient. It's not strong to deal with problems. Well, how, in a family when people organize a barbecue, all the problems come through? Does anybody experience this? Say aye. Anybody? Aye. Right? Great. It happens. You organize something and then all the problems happen. It's when you are giving a gift, it's so complicated because you don't have the muscle. That same thing is in every community. Of course, you have some sacred indigenous communities both all over the world, in Africa and Latin America, that are still sacred keepers of that culture of reciprocity. It's still with Mother Earth. It's still in community, not wanting to be individualized. Still relating to the ancestors, right? There's still some dominant traditions of churches and religions that are still there. Reciprocity within the church, at least on the Christian side, trying to live the example of Christ. Trying to have reciprocity. Christ didn't have a vision of empire, had a vision of reciprocity. So restoring all those cultures. We cannot form the global federation unless we reinvigorate all the cultures. And second, which is part of why you're here, is we want to regenerate the great traditions of social change. There has been millions of people, I think tens of millions of people that have fight, just like most of us, to understand social change, to organizing their neighborhoods. We are not the first ones, and we won't be the last ones that are making change on this world. We come from a humongous lineage of people that have sacrificed everything in their lives for the betterment of this world. Okay? But most of us operate like that tradition doesn't exist. Like we're rebuilding the wheel. Like we don't learn from the ancestors. This is why in Ayni we want to reinvigorate those great traditions of social change. Part of the workshop today is going to be about this. You're going to notice that that's what we're talking about. So that you can see yourself in a lineage, not as an individual isolated leader or activist, but as a person, as part of a larger lineage. That's why we're doing all these movement trainings to regenerate the tradition. And we're just one part of that with other institutes and other people, right? We're just a little piece. And then the last one, it's the sacred work and great alternative. What I mean by that is that there's so many ways right now that we can be doing life that are different from now. We need cooperatives, we need cooperative banks, we need shared banks. So for example, here in East Boston, we have, what kind of crisis do you think we have in East Boston?
Housing.
That's right. Insane, right? Banks, for example, I don't own a home here. I've been here for 20 years. I cannot get a loan because of my salary, because I don't have enough money to pay for the $600,000, $700,000 of houses here. I live with my parents. We cannot afford it, right? But there's no bank that will take me. Are you following me in this? But we need to form all sets of alternatives, because you know how many people are looking for the same loan I'm looking for? Thousands. At least there's 38,000 people here. At least 3,000 people. 10% at least are looking for loans for buying a home. Well, instead of putting that equity in Bank of America and Sovereign Bank, why don't I put it to a cooperative bank?
Yeah.
Why don't we have a municipal bank here? And I talked about it before, right? What about Citibank, where we can put all that? What if the city gives us the loans? There's all these alternatives that we have to figure out around food, around clothing, around sharing. There's all this other alternative economy that we have to create. Are you following me on this? But we think that we cannot get the great alternative unless we change the cultures. Because people are not creating alternatives, not because they don't want to, it's because that reciprocity is weak. Are you following me on this? Okay. So that's the 3 proposals. And that is the purpose of global reciprocity. That's the project that the Ayni Institute is aiming to have. Because right now the problems cannot just be solved by East Boston, or by the United States, or by Latin America, or by Asia. It has to be a whole, local, national, and global response. And that's what we're aiming for. Okay, this is a quick introduction to where we are. So how to engage with Ayni, and I'll stop in a few seconds so we can start the session. But there's a few ways how you can engage with us. We're cool people, and I wanted to introduce some of my cool teammates. That over there, if we can give a round of applause to Fatima, that is with me at the Ayni Institute. Give her a round of applause. She's a little bit shy in groups, but in one-on-one she's great. So, do that. Then we have Becca here, if you can see her on the back. Give a round of applause to Becca. Hangs out with us too. We have Lina over here, that she's running our movements program. And we have Vero there, that is, give a round of applause. All of my teammates. So I'm going to explain in a second what we're doing, and you can relate to them, okay? So we have a couple of programs. So number one, how many of you feel like you want to regain a relationship with Mother Earth, with community, and with your ancestors? That feels that might be important for you. Any of those 3, just raise your hand, just to know the people in the room. Great. We're running a free program called the SEEDS program. That is a 9-week program that takes you through a communal process of regaining that relationship from wherever you're at to where you want to be. No pushing, you should do this, none of that stuff. Everyone is welcome from any tradition, from any religion. We take people from the European tradition, from the African tradition, from the Latin American tradition. If you're the Christian, if you're Jewish, any tradition, you're welcome. Because we're not trying to create one culture for everybody. We think every culture should regenerate. Are you following me on this? We have to respect the cultures, but they have to become better and stronger. So if you're interested in that, please talk to either Vero or Fatima right here. I think they're closing down applications this week. So if you're really interested, talk to them, okay? And come hang out with us. We explain this whole vision that I told you in 9 weeks. It's kind of cool. So that's 1. 2, we're doing this training is only an introduction to a 3-day training that we're doing on June. So if you're trying to do social movement ecology training, which is a deeper dive into strategy movements, you should come to that. Talk to Lena about that. Then we have advanced movement ecology, which is the 13-week version of this. So if you're a movement nerd and want to look at movements across the world, you should go to that. And that's led by my brother Paul Engler and me, and Lena will be leading that. And then we're running our first time this course, which is a course for global reciprocity. I told you at the beginning that you cannot understand the problems, or we cannot understand the problems of the world unless we look at the last 10,000 years of history. Well, you would tell me, Carlos, you're crazy. 10,000 is a lot. It is a lot. And you should not be doing it alone. And we've been doing it now for a couple of years. So this is the first course that we're running, where we're guiding people through the process so that you don't go crazy. Because if you actually have a heart and you look through 10,000 years of history, you will get depressed. There's so much pain. Because these relationships that I told you, you can see how they get broken over and over and over again. But it's a humongous process to gain resiliency as a leader. Because right now the leadership that we need is not leadership that can think about today, but they can think about the next 200 years. That's the kind of leadership that we need. Our children of our children of our children are going to be affecting the decisions we make today. So that's the course about that. So if you're interested in global reciprocity, talk to Becca and I are leading that course. So come and nerd out with us for 13 weeks. It's online. It's, we'll figure it out, but it's cool. And the last one is that this is part of a larger week of reciprocity that's been organized by Ms. Vero over there. If you can give her another round of applause. And that's Josh, her partner, that has been very helpful to us too. So we have other events happening. Tomorrow, we have Intro to Amazonian Healing. We had a teacher from the Amazon that has been coming here to come and hang out with us and teach us really the lineage of the Amazon and how they view the universe, the earth, the forest, the water, and all the elements. So we're going to talk about ceremonies, about Amazonian cosmovision tomorrow with my brother Anvero. Is that correct? No? Right? So that's tomorrow, Amazonian Healing. So if you want to go that, invite friends, all the good stuff. It's all on our Facebook page too. Then on Wednesday, Fatima, Vero, and I are doing Intro to Sacred Geometry. This is important. I don't know if you see that stuff here. Some of you might see it. But most of us, deep breaths everybody, most of us have lost because of the way things are structured in education, bless you, and consumerism, lost our way to make our own things. Make our own clothing. Put our own food on the floor. Build our own home. Make our own instruments. Is this true or not? All of our ancestors, just 3 or 4 generations, everybody did all those things. But we lost the sacred gift of creating. And consumerism has broken that for us. We don't do our things anymore. So things are just things. They're not sacred anymore. So if you want to regain that capacity, come and hang out with us in the sacred geometry. We say sacred geometry because in every culture, there's been sacred geometry. The understanding of how shapes and space and times all fit together. So that's what we're going to talk about. Our teacher Sadir Milla taught us about this stuff. We're going to share that. And then the last thing, which I'm really excited about, which is Becca and my brother Rodrigo are leading that on Thursday. If you can really come to this, you got to come hang out. You see those posters that I tell you? We have a lot more of those posters. And that's part of a project that we're doing, of a mobile museum. Because most of our people want to know their culture, but where do they get it? And sometimes there's no resources in school. So we're bringing this mobile museum everywhere, but we're starting the first time here in East Boston. So we're going to change this whole office. It's going to be a museum. So we're going to have a night at the museum. Come hang out with us on Thursday. Okay? Does this make sense, anybody? Any questions? Any questions? Beautiful. Take a deep breath, everybody. Take a deep breath. Beautiful. Let's get started. Okay. I'm from Peru. I've been in East Boston for 20 years, and I've been in the immigrant movement for 17 years of my life. And this is probably when I get started. I was about 16 or 15 years old. At that time, this is my first time I went to Washington, D.C. for what at that time was called the DREAM Act. Okay? And then from there, I worked as a young leader. I've been an organizer of something called the Student Immigrant Movement. I was a co-founder of that. Do people know the Student Immigrant Movement, or SIM? Some people do? Yeah. Great. So I've been co-founder of SIM. Then I got crazy and we went to the national level and traveled 20 out of 30 days to build something called United We Dream, which was the largest network of dreamers at that time. And then after 4 years of campaigning and traveling for 20 out of 30 days, we passed something called DACA. And we got about 800,000 to 900,000 work permits. Then I became a pile of undigested happenings because I had been 10 years in the movement going, go, 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 go. And I didn't know what to do because people kept asking me, what did you all do to win? And there's I think a TV sportcaster says the following: when you win, everything you did was right. But when you lose, everything you did was wrong. I couldn't tell the difference. Because for me, I lost for 10 years. And now suddenly, the next morning, we won. We tried everything, but I didn't know what was a strategic versus wasn't a strategic. Are you following me on this? And that's why I started the Ayni Institute. Because I realized if I was confused, I needed to put trainings and stuff to get clear from other people. Okay? So just to give you a sense. So, and now through Ayni, and Lynn and I are working with Paul Engler on the Movements Project lately. I don't know, have any people heard of the training called Momentum? Okay, Momentum is birthed out of Ayni. We incubated the Momentum training as a gift to the movements, that now is an independent institution, part of our family. But just to give you a sense, we also do a lot of coaching, so we get to see hundreds, if not thousands, of people through our trainings and coachings. And there's something kind of crazy that you will notice. After you see that many people in a room, you start seeing that a lot of people have the same problems. Has anybody seen this before? People have the same problems. So it's kind of hard. It would be like we're stupid or something to not see that people share the same issues. So part of what we want to show the presentation today is to share some of that. Okay, great. So now I'm going to get into the presentation. Learning about social movements, number 1. Okay. So before we dive into about social movements, okay, most of us in the movement are looking at activity or action, things that are happening all the time. As all of you know, some educators like Paulo Freire and others have talked about that education is not what you're doing, but there is a process of reflection. Yes or no? And that process of reflection and action is what creates praxis. Does that make some sense? So it creates learning. Great. Well, some of us in the movement work are sometimes unaware or in autopilot mode around how we observe the movement. This is very important because the whole presentation to this, how you are aware of movements. We are unaware or we're in autopilot. And because we're in unaware and autopilot, our behavior is reactive. Okay? That doesn't mean sometimes it's good reactive, sometimes bad reactive. The problem is that sometimes you don't know which one to use. But it's reactive. We react. Of course, this doesn't just happen in movements. It happens in life. Yes or no?
Yes.
There's patterns that we want to change, but we're unaware of them. So how do we change it? We're unaware, right? So this is important. Second piece. Well, what's the opposite? Awareness. And if you have awareness, then you have mindful action. But most of us are not cultivating the discipline, both in the mind, in the spirit, in the body, and in our emotions, to be able to be aware. Is movement work or activist work or social justice work highly stressing? Yes or no? Raise your hands. Raise your hands. Come on. I'm doing most of the talking. You can at least participate. Highly. How much awareness do you feel that we need? A little bit or a lot? A lot. We must cultivate awareness, and with that we have mindful action. Okay? Now let me give you a second why. I'm not calling this theory, but observation. I want to tell you why. Because of the way that we have schooling today, okay? And because of the way that we've been pretty much given one model of schooling, predominantly from Europe, what it has happened is that we are confusing theory with wisdom. What do I mean by that? We confuse that because we hold up, theory is just a perspective, an understanding. Now in academia you can debate who has the truth, but sometimes there's 1 or 2 or 3 truths. Are you following me in this? Because there's this debates going on, we do not observe anymore. We're not aware. We go to academia and says, give me an answer. Let me purchase your answer. Let me go to your movement training, Carlos. Let me buy your... I'm not asking you here to purchase my vision of movements. That's not the plan. What I want you is to be aware of movements. Because what we need is more perspectives. But for that you have to be aware. And you have to observe. The reason why I say observe is because our ancestors used to observe all the cycles of the stars. Some cycles of the stars last longer than a lifetime. Is this true or not? Of course. Sometimes to get the moon and the sun to align on a particular axis, it takes 200, 156 years to go through that. Think about that when we're thinking about creation and the pyramids and all this stuff, because when you're thinking about cycles like that, you need at least 2 to 3 lifetimes to see at least one, and then you need at least another 3 or 4 to see another one. That is the power of continuing observation. That's why I say there's a great tradition. Because we're not observing all together. We need to observe individually and collectively. That's why the learning and observation needs to be both. Okay? And that's part of what we're going to talk about today. Boom. The path. This is important. Because it depends where you're at. Sometimes in social change, you start this way. You start as an individual. And you are either directly affected or you care in your value sense about an issue. And what do you do? Tell me, what do you do when you care about an issue like this? What do you do? At the beginning, what do you do? Go ahead, sir.
You look for like-minded people.
You look for like-minded people. What else?
Think about it.
You're thinking about it? Great. You think about the issue all the time. You get obsessed by it, right? And what do you give to the movement at that time as an individual?
Time.
You give your time. What else?
Reposts.
What is it?
Said reposts.
You repost on Facebook like crazy. That then your family is disowning you because you're spamming them the whole time. Yes, welcome to my life. Right? But as an individual, you put your resources, individual resources, into the issue, correct? You put your voice, you put your feet, you show up to things. Does that make sense? You try to contribute as much as I can. If you stick in the game for a year or 2 or 3, you realize something. This is an important realization. Not everybody goes through this. Is that what the hell? We need an organization. You notice that either you're part of an organization and the organization doesn't work very well. Has anybody experienced organizations that don't work? Great. Thank you for lying about other things too. Some people are like, no, never. I want to work with you then. Okay? I want to hang out with you. They go to an organization. They know that they need an organization. Some of them have an organization. Some of them don't have an organization. But why do they need an organization? Because they realize that they don't have enough power or enough support. They need more people.
Yeah.
And they begin to realize that this activism, social change thinking actually takes a lot. Yes or no?
Yeah.
So it's like we need an organization. We need an organization. Okay? Whether it's a small group, a collective, a large institution, whatever is the form of the organization. And then they spend a few more years working at the organization, becoming a 501c3 or saying, I hate you, 501c3, whichever one they do. But they're working at the organization, right? And then most people don't have this breakthrough, but some people do. They have a breakthrough. They need a movement. They realize that the problem that they're facing, right now I start and I say, as an individual, I want to solve that I'm getting kicked out of my neighborhood in East Boston because of the rent money, because of the gentrification. I go to meetings, I speak about it, I talk, I try to gather my like-minded people, I do my research, and I cannot change things. And maybe I do a little bit of change, but I cannot change things. Then I go and say, we need a neighborhood organization. Then we build a neighborhood organization, and then we try, and sometimes we have breakthroughs, yes or no? We win some things. But then we realize, wow, we got housing for 50 people. Isn't that great, yes or no? It's amazing. I would love right now to have 50 more houses for people, not right now. But does that solve the problem, yes or no?
No.
Right? The problem is like this. At the surface level, as an activist, you're trying to do, then as an organization, and then you realize, wow, this problem, it doesn't require just an organization. It actually requires all the organizations in East Boston and in the city of Boston to collaborate together to have a larger movement so that we can tackle the real estate industry. Holy guacamole. That's a whole other thing. Yes or no? Okay. Why do I say this distinction? Most people say they need a movement, but they don't actually behave like they do. Why is that? Because which one is more important if you believe in a movement? The movement or the organization? The movement. The organization must submit to the will of the movement. Does that make some sense? Because the movement is, the organization is for the purpose of activating the movement, all the little organizations. But when your organization is individualized, of saying, no, me. It's my organization, it's my needs. I was a long time ago in a meeting with major stakeholders from one major movement. I'm not going to reference the movement because I don't want to put any movement there. But I was with all the core players of the movement. I was there as an observer. People talking about their plans, and at the last end of the meeting, people trying to schedule the next meeting. It was interesting to see this process because in the last 2 hours, people debated whether the meeting was the real work versus not the real work. This meeting is not the real work. This meeting is people are debating. Now, people say those things, but what's underneath? Underneath is that people think that they can win on their own. Right? Because if I don't need you, then why would I coordinate with you? I only coordinate with you because I need you. So most people think they need a movement, but they don't really accept it. Okay? That's why most people don't have the breakthrough. Let me tell you, activists or individuals go through the same thing. They don't submit to the organization. Me. Nobody's saying that there should not be individuality in here and here and here. Nobody's saying that. But I'm saying if you have an inside strategic like that, you need more people, you have to give your resources away. People would always ask me, Carlos, but that organization you spent 6 years building, would you give it away? I said, I will give it away in a second if I can win on my issue. In a heartbeat. How dare you, but we spend years. No, I know, I spend years building it too. But what's the point of the organization? Is it to remain alive forever or to actually have success? Now, I'll do the last one, but we're not even going to get to this. But some of you, after being in movements, when you look at the best social change leaders, I'll tell you about this, but it's tradition. you notice that one movement, which I'll explain how long a movement takes, one cycle, which to me takes 5 to 15 years. Holy guacamole. To do multiple cycles, you need a tradition. Either to be part of a church or to be part of an alternative tradition, whatever the tradition is. You need a larger infrastructure to sustain the movement work for a lifetime. Most people cannot understand movements because they drop by the third year. So you can never see a cycle. Most people can never be part of tradition because they don't even do one movement. And they don't commit to a lifetime of social change. We have people that still are trying to change the world by saying, tomorrow I'm going to go to my normal life. They don't understand that there is not such a thing as normal life because the world is so screwed that there's no normalcy anymore. There's no going back anywhere. We actually have to change the world. That's the only way to have safety because we're in such a disbalance with everything. So that's the path. And when you're looking at movement books and research, and until there's a great tradition of social change, there's thousands of books about strikes, about boycotts, about civil resistance, about organizations, about alternatives. There's thousands of books. And if you ever want to read stuff, we have a little library here. You can always come and read for free for us, okay?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, please come. We're trying to revitalize. So just come and hang out. East Boston, we want to make this your house. But when you look at all the movements, and you read about their stories, and you read about their main problem, there's one problem that everyone is always bringing forward. One problem. And that's the problem of a strategic capacity. One problem. Every single movement is trying to figure this out, even today. How do I become more strategic to figure out the problems that I have? Because we have a lot of problems, but the strategies are clearly not working. We don't have right now in the country a movement that is wide enough, or movement of movements large enough to be able to create the change we're looking for. That's just the truth. But what do we mean by strategic capacity? By strategic capacity, we mean two things. Doing the right thing at the right time. That is all we mean. What does doing the right thing at the right time means? Okay? Well, I explained to you. I had an aunt. We're an immigrant family. And she, with her hard labor, bought a house in 2007. She did the right thing, yes or no? But she did it at the wrong time. And she paid the price for it. So when you do the right thing at the right time, your rewards are multiplying. But when you do it at the wrong time, you lose everything. This is very important thing. So the whole presentation today is about what's the right thing and what's the right time. Just to give you, every movement is trying to answer this question. So let's talk about the right time. Okay, so what do I mean by social movements? Number one, I'm not going to go through everything because of our time. But movements go through a 5 to 15 year cycle of life and death. This is important to understand. Okay? 5 to 15 years. What do I mean by that? Is that when you get your movement started and when you finish your movement, it's at least 10 years. Most of us don't enter a movement from the beginning. Enter in the middle or in the end. There's various parts. But if you actually measure the different movements and their seasons, you will notice this big pattern. It takes a long time to build a social movement. And when you look at the greatest leaders, when you look at Baker or you look at Gandhi or you look at Mandela, right? Whether you agree with their politics or not, but when you look at their skills, one of the core traits that they share is that they've been able to have multiple cycles. Think about this. If you're learning how to cook, and you cook a meal, but by the middle of the meal, you abandon the meal. You never knew how to make one meal. Yes or no? But by the time you make one meal, it takes you 10 to 15 years. So by the time you finish your one meal movement, you already are like, holy guacamole, I made all these mistakes because I have no clue how to do the first cycle. Are you following me on this? So our proficiency in movements is very complicated, just to give you a sense. Particularly if you don't have a long view. Does that make any sense? Because the cycle is so long. And individuals and organizers or leaders abandon most movements at the third or the fourth year. They abandon them because they don't see the success or they have a different expectation of what the timing of the movement is. Okay? So that's why it's very difficult. Again, it's not a single organization, but rather a multitude of organizations coming together to move an issue forward. An issue is the problem the movement is trying to solve. It's a collection of organizations. Okay? And then we can talk about this, but movements operate at three levels: individual, organization, their base, the movement itself, and the public. How the whole country relates to the issue. It's very complex. We're going to break it down in a second. Okay? Okay, let's talk about time, seasons. In our perception of Ayni, in Ayni we believe that we are all children of Mother Earth. Everyone comes from the great, whatever is your tradition, whether you have a different name for your God or for your deity or for other people, we believe that we come from the universal laws of nature. That this process of life and death is in everything. Okay? And because there's a cycle of life and death, movements also go through the same cycle of life and death. And when you look at a movement, you can actually see it go through seasons. Okay? But because the movement takes 5 to 15 years, to really see the season, you have to be really aware. So we're going to work on that for a second on us. So the seasons. So let's talk about seasons for a second. This is the winter. What is the winter about? The winter is an internal time. It's a time of low activity. It's a time to be within. It's a time of coldness. Well, the opposite of the winter is the summer. External, high activity, time to be outside. Ah!
Yeah.
How many of you like the summer? Raise your hand. Like the summer?
Good time for organizing.
Good time for organizing, right? Then you have the fall, right? If it's winter, spring, summer, right? The spring is a time of regeneration. It's a time of new beginnings. The summer is the fall is the opposite. It's a time of degeneration, of things breaking down. Each season lasts about 2 to 4 years in a movement. Okay? And there's one season that you can really get stuck on, which is the winter. Because if you don't plant new seeds, nothing grows. So you can see in history movements stuck in winter for 10, 20 years. That happens. But once you start a season of spring, it has to go through the summer and fall. Even if they're shorter periods. It has to go through that. It's a constant nature of how people organize themselves in this process. Now, people, organizations, movements, everyone is going through cycles. Okay? How many of you feel that you as an individual right now are going through a spring in your leadership? Think about it for a second. That you feel right now in your leadership, because all leadership comes from within, that in your leadership you're in a springtime. In a time of growth. Just raise your hand. Let's just see. How many people are in your springtime? Great. You're in a time of awakening of new things. How many of you feel like you're in a time of summer? That you're just like, I'm everywhere. I'm excited. I'm in my best time. I'm trying to do my best. I'm outside. How many of you feel like are in summer? No summers? That's okay. How many of you feel like you're in a fall? That you notice that things are beginning to break down. You don't have as much energy. So we have 1 fall, 2 falls. Any other falls? A little bit? Sometimes of you are between summer and fall. The breakdown is because you are disoriented. That's part of the season change. You're preparing for the winter. How many of you feel like you're in a winter, in a time of within? Great. Perfect. That it's okay. Okay? Now let me tell you this stuff, which is, it's not part of the training, but I guess we'll just say it. But because of our culture of do, more, be the best, smile, be the best, smile. Have you heard this? Do. Everyone wants everyone to be in an eternal summer. Are you not in a summer? Are you wrong? What's going on with you? Are you not in a summer? Why are you not in a summer? Smile. Wake up. Produce. How many people have experienced this? Say I. And because of this, we do not respect our seasons. It's like not going to sleep. If you don't respect your winter at night, where you go within, how are you going to have a good day? The same thing happens in people's leadership. Winter is an extraordinary time. But even us in Boston that go through hard winters, we sometimes have bad stories about winters. I hate the winter. Why? The winter is beautiful because in the winter is when you choose which seed you will plant for the next season. But most organizations don't respect people's winters. And most of us individually don't respect our winters. Don't even understand it. We have shame about it. Forget about the shame. Respect your winters. It's important. Same thing happens in organizations. How many of your organizations are in a winter? Raise your hands. Raise your hands. You know it. In a winter, it's a time within. But how many of your organizations are struggling trying to be in a summer? Yes or no? Particularly if you're trying to respond to Trump. If you're trying to respond to another crisis. Yes or no?
Yes.
And because you don't retreat, you don't take care of yourselves, the organization actually never goes through the winter, and people break down, and the relationships that are already fragile, because you need to be in a winter, break down more. Has anybody experienced this before? Say I. Seasons is important. You must have awareness of what your season of your leadership is, the season of your organization is, and then you can be aware about the season of your movement is. Okay, that's how you go the line. Okay, now again, one cycle is bigger than the other, and all so forth and so on. Before I continue, because I dumped a lot of stuff, any questions that people might have? Okay, take a deep breath, everybody. You notice why I'm trying to get you to be specific. Because the awareness is that we say movement, but we don't know what the hell we mean. We don't know which movement. Talking national? Are you talking local? Are you talking global? Well, what season are they in? So then, because we cannot distinguish, and it's really difficult to organize people if you don't know the seasons, because you're always getting people conflicting theories of seasons. The climate movement national is going through spring. Early spring.
Yes.
The Green New Deal is propelling that. You can feel it on the air. Now, within the climate movement, there's all these other sub-movements. There's a whole alternative cooperative. There's a whole, and they're all going through different seasons. Are you following me in this? Now, one spring retaliates to everything. It supports everything. Okay? But we have to have that awareness, because what happens is sometimes we say, well, I think the movement is in the spring. I'm sorry, in the winter. The movement, people are having a whole different reality. And that's what we have to organize. Second point that I will say to them, continue. We tend to confuse our own season with the season of the organization, and we tend to confuse our own season of an organization to the season of the movement. I coach a lot of people in the work in the field of criminal justice, particularly mostly formerly incarcerated black women that I work with, and I do this exercise with them. And 99% of them agree on the season that the movement is in, and the organization. And when I ask who has a different season, for a particular reason, they are confused. They're thinking of their own season. So they see the organization through their own lens. So if I'm going through a winter, everything is fucked. Does that make some sense? What's the secret to keeping people in your organization? I'm going to continue this. Take care of them in the winter, and they will be with you forever. Don't ask them to be in a summer. Take care of them in a winter. Same for an organization. Great. Let me go on. This is the immigrant rights movement. Just so you can see a little bit of the seasonality. It's a little map. Thank you for the laughter. So I appreciate it. But we see the fall of the immigrant rights movement sometime between 1996 and 9/11, just to give you a sense of a long period of a fall. Again, once we go deeper, what event, you can go crazier on that stuff, right? But 9/11 really crystallized a winter for the movement, where the national hopes of the movement were pretty much slashed. I don't know if people know, but in September 6, 2001, there was almost a legalization deal between Bush and Fox, the president of Mexico, that 5 days later got completely erased because of 9/11. So that's the winter of the movement. Then people started doing campaigns, doing the freedom rides. People started building coalition structures. And then in 2006, there was the mega marches. How many people experienced the mega marches or saw these big marches that immigrants did?
Yeah.
Great. That's the springtime. Okay? It's an awakening. Now, sometimes people confuse the spring with the summer because they have a hot day, and people in Boston do this all the time. Yes or no? We go into shorts, it's already summer, and then the next day we freeze our asses.
Yeah.
Yes or no? Same thing happens on a movement. There's a hot day and we confuse it with the summer. Okay? So the spring happens, and then mega marches, Dream Act. In 2006, we have millions of people on the street. 2007, we got only hundreds. That's not a summer. That's a spring. It's an awakening only. Then in 2008, the Obama election propels us to a long 4-year summer, where there is this whole fight for legalization, for all these things. And that's also the birth, at that point, of what we call the Dream Movement, right? And then the movement in 2012 wins DACA. Humongous victory. At that time, the largest victory of the movement in 26 years. At that time. Then the movement uses the same strategy and goes and tries to win another thing for parents called DAPA, which will legalize another 5 million people. And we won it, but we lost in the courts. Now, that propel already... Now, you got to think about this. Some of us start here. You're going. Spring, going, summer, going. You win and you're like, holy shit, thank God we won something because I'm fucking tired. Right? We keep going. Some people feel shame. I'm tired, but I keep going. And then at some point, the generation that went through the season takes a break.
Yeah.
They don't go to a meeting and say, we're going to take a break. Everyone just takes a fucking break. And then the movement goes through a fall. Meaning that the strategy, the structure of the movement doesn't work anymore for the next season. It needs to be destroyed or reconstructed for the next time. Okay? Trump becomes the last. Okay, so some people have heard of cosecha or movement cosecha, which is kind of a movement that Brenda and I and Gabby and others are part of, right? That Fatima and I started. The movement cosecha emerges here, but we're in a fall. And then we're in a winter. Right? So it takes all this time to reorganize the movement. And what we're trying to do right now is to get the migratory movement to go through a proper winter so that we can have the next spring. Now, what does this tell us? That there will be a spring. The question is, would we be ready with the right strategy, the right structure, and the right story? That's the question of the movement.
Yes.
Are you following me on this? This is one cycle from here to here. Okay? Now there's been cycles before, and there will be cycles in the future. Are you following me on this? Why is it hard to be aware of a movement? Because some people experience this. Everyone loves the summer, everyone hates the winter. Are you following me on this? Or they are here, and by the third year, they're like, well, this is never going to change, and they leave. Isn't it so great if they would know that we're in a winter, or that we're in a fall, and that you're about to take the journey of your lifetime to make a social movement that will change part of this country? Is this making any sense, crew? Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yes.
Fit together like where the individuals are.
You have to go through your winter. Respect your winter. Don't do summer if you're going through winter. You see, this is the thing. All leadership comes from within. It comes from here. Inside. What propels you. Transformation. To have transformation, you have to break down yourself. Sometimes people say something inside of you has to die. It's part of that. A way of thinking has to die. A perceptive has to die. Right? To have maturity, immaturity has to die. It's a process of death. But most of us don't die. Most of us just institutionalize and have a zombie body inside of us.
Have a what?
A zombie. That is half alive. We don't kill it. We don't let the new seed awaken. So what happens is, so you're asking me the question, what is as a movement doctor, what is my recommendation to put in this term? Go through your winter. Respect your winter. Why is this important? Because you're in a winter now, but you're not going to be always in a winter.
It feels like that.
Yeah, it feels like that. But you're regaining all this year. And sometimes in leadership, and we can, maybe we can do another session on just the leadership seasons on your leadership. But you can spend a year and a half on a winter. Okay? Within the winter, you have little winter, spring, summers, right? But you can spend a year and a half, and that year and a half sucks. To me, those cycles happen every 5 years. A year, yourself is asking you to stop. Most of us, winter is painful because we don't accept we're in a winter. Accept. I don't want to be in a winter. I want to be in the organizing. I want to do this. Well, why are you doing that to yourself? Does that make some sense? And this is the problem with movement efficiency, and I'm going to stop here. The movement efficiency problem is that we have people that are not in the right season burning organizations. So not only you are withdrawing because your capacity is not really there, but you fucking kill the whole body. Because you think that you are greater than your season. I see leaders that go and they're in a winter. When the top leaders in a winter, you have to be really careful. If they're not aware of it, they'll take everyone through a winter. Has anybody experienced this? Say aye.
Aye.
Great. So just respect your winter and let us, Ayni, take care of you. That's what we're trying to do. Just hang out with us. That's what we're doing. Hang out with us. We'll later do the global reciprocity. I have it on the slide. Go ahead.
For us, I feel like, it'd be nice if we get the law passed, but I feel like even if the law is passed, we as a movement we're still trying to find ourselves. We're still trying to educate the public about workplace abuse.
That is correct.
And I feel like that's like, in some ways, that's even harder than getting the law passed, because where do you even begin to have that
That is
discussion?
correct. Now, you have 10 years. In what timeline are you both operating? Are you operating in 10 years or in 2 years or in 3 years?
She's been doing this for 10 years. So.
But how much is your planning? Are you operating thinking we have 10 or are you thinking we have 2?
More short term.
More short term. Now, is it bad to think short term? Nothing wrong. The problem is when you don't have long term.
Yeah.
You have 10 years. So what happens is you're trying to cramp everything into 2 years, and that's how now the seasons work. Okay? Most people, and I'll give you one thing. Do you want to know what's the number one reason why in movements we don't understand this? Number one, because there's no craft. We do not see this as a craft, because most people doing it are individuals. There's no science to this. There is a science to this. You think we're the only ones that are building movements? You think there's not been millions of people that have done movements? There's a whole literature, there's a whole wisdom of this. But we have this generation or this culture that I'm part of too, that says, I want to plant the seed on Monday, and on Tuesday I want to see the fruits. That's not how life works. If we don't align to the universal laws of life and nature, we're never going to build anything. You have to understand. That's why wisdom is knowing how long things take. That's what wisdom is. Okay? And when you get older, you understand wisdom because you experience it. Okay? That's why we say ancestors, because we young people, it's great, we're excited, but we need to relate to the ancestors. Because we didn't think we know it all, and that's not true. That's why I have my teachers from the Amazon and the end, they beat me up. They're like, you're wrong. Great, thank you. It's important. Because we become arrogant, thinking because we saw a little cycle that we know everything. Wait until you go to 2 cycles. And then you'll be like, the 2 cycles didn't match. What the fuck? That's when you go, and that's in 30 years. But 30 years is nothing, but 30 years will be 50. We got it. Or somebody will be 70. We still got it. We can give advice. We can do the next movement. Are you following me on this? Use your time wisely. Okay. Are you ready for do the right things? Yes? Are you there? How many of you feel like this is important to talk? Important conversations to have in the movement? Raise your hands.
Yes.
How many of you feel like you want to go deeper and do a lot more training on this and go crazy? Or bring other people? How many of you have a director that you want to bring and be like, dude or dudette, you're in a season. You're in a winter. Come, realize you're in a season. How many of you want that? Raise your hand. Send them to us. We'll fix them. Or at least we'll try to get them aware. They have to take their own step, but we'll get them aware. So right things. So, okay, so we're talking about timing. Are we sensing timing?
Yeah. Time.
Let's talk about things.
Yeah.
What kind of things? Okay. When you're running a movement, okay, there's all kinds of strategies that are out there. Yes or no? Sometimes those strategies don't get along. Yes or no? Is that right? There's all these different cultures, and when you're talking about strategies, you're talking about theory of change. You can go through here. Don't worry. You're good.
Oh, okay.
So this video is for the community, so they should see the word community. Right? Theories of change, right? Now in a movement, there is different strategies. Okay? This is very, very important. Again, I said surface and the depth. Okay? We believe when you zoom out, okay? My brother Paul Engler and I, and some of our research that him, his brother, and so many of us all has done. When you zoom out, you notice that everyone or anyone engaged in social change, now you can organize this in another form, of course, if you want, is trying to do 3 different strategies. One is personal transformation, meaning they're trying to change the individual. Okay? Second is changing dominant institutions. They're trying to change the system. And 3, they're trying to create an alternative. A different kind of system. Let me explain it to you with a story maybe from a teacher. I am a teacher, and I love my students. I'm in East Boston High School, or I'm in Dorchester High or in English High, and I love my students. And in this classroom, I work every day to get my students to be whatever they can so they can be good in life. Are you following me on this? I believe that if I change one life, even in my whole 10, 20 years, one life, it will be worth it. Have you met anybody, teachers like that?
Yeah.
They put money of their own pocket to buy you meals, to buy you food, whatever, because they want you to succeed. That's personal transformation. If we change one person, we can change the world. Isn't that a beautiful belief? It's beautiful. It's true. But then the teacher doesn't go from East High, goes to Brooklyn High, right? To another school that maybe has more resources. And he realizes, he or she or they, that they have the books that they have are not the last edition. The other school has the 5th edition, I have the 1st edition. How the hell is that? I have 40 students, they have 15 students. The teachers make this money, I make this money. It's completely crazy. Then they realize that the problem of teaching is not just, that the problem of teaching is not just in, it's okay, don't worry, things drop, things change. The problem with teaching is that it's not just individual, that there's a larger systematic problem. Yes or no?
Yeah.
Do some teachers have that awareness? Yes or no? Have you had that awareness in your life? Then they can take two avenues. One avenue is they can say, you know what, I'm going to build my own school. Why not? It's me, it's her, it's Brenda, it's Lena. We're going to gather the teachers and we're just going to raise money and build our own classroom. Okay, there was a university called Freedom University in Georgia. I don't know if people have heard of it, where teachers gathered together to give students that are undocumented a undergrad in their own time. They're from their own alternative school. They were like, well, if students cannot go to school, then we're going to give them the alternative. Isn't that magical? Giving their time, putting their money to creating an alternative. Okay, the current system doesn't work with create alternative. Well, another option is that then they say, well, maybe it's not just an alternative. Maybe it's the whole way of how the resources of the schools are distributed. We have to change that. Because holy guacamole, as an alternative, I realize that I'm competing with the whole market. And I'm competing with state funding. And that's not enough. I need to change the dominant institutions. Okay? 3 different strategies. Okay? Does that make any sense to you? Be the change you want to see. Also, what are things in personal transformation? People are doing yoga, meditation. People are doing leadership development practices, AA. There's so many people that are doing so many programs to do personal transformation. Is this making sense to you? Tons of things to change people from within. Healing trainings, all kinds of things. Mentoring. Right? All these people are part of the movement. Alternatives. Building the new world in the shell of the old. They're building cooperative banks. Alternative schools, right? Dominant institutional change. They're doing community organizing, forming labor unions, doing mass protests, making alternative political parties. That is dominant institutional change. But what happens? Have you ever been part of a meeting where people fight with each other?
Yeah.
Has anybody experienced this? Yes? When people fight, sometimes people are fighting for personalities and power. I get that. And other times, you notice that people sometimes are fighting at that something here at the surface, but at the bottom there is something else? What we believe is that people at the bottom level, are actually having strategic differences. But they don't know how to articulate that I am personal transformation and you're dominant institutional change. I'll give you an example. You have a community meeting and you're talking about gentrification. Okay? And somebody says, well, the 5 of us are the committee, and Gabriela says, well, what we need to do is we need to shut down the bridge, and let these landlords and the city of Boston, whatever. And I say to her, well, I disagree. I think what we should do is do a program to take care of the people that are losing homes and support them and heal their pain that they're going through that, right? But then he says, no, what I think we should do is we should do a cooperative of renters. Okay? Are all those 3 great ideas, yes or no? But then we say, what do these people say about these people? Now, actually, before we do that, how many of you feel like you, in your movement work, you gravitate more towards personal transformation? Raise your hand. You gravitate more towards personal transformation. It's okay. 1, you gravitate. We all hold all 3. Some of us one more than the other, but just that you gravitate. How many of you feel you gravitate more to alternatives? Raise your hands. Great, we have a couple. How many of you feel like you gravitate to dominant institutional change? Great. What do the personal transformation people say about the changing dominant institutions people? Like, not you, but people that say bad things, you know, like criticisms with bad things. What do people say about them? Not you, though. It's all the people. Unrealistic. So these people say to these people unrealistic? Tell me more. What do you say to them?
That not me personally.
Yeah, other people. Never.
People are thinking too big, and that the types of change they're pushing for won't happen, and that in the time that they're pushing for those larger things to happen, people are suffering.
That is correct. And we're not remedying them, right?
Right.
That's right. What else? But what else do they say? Tell me more. Tell me more. What else do they say?
Think about yourself first.
What is it? You have to think about yourself first. How dare you if you're unaware. You're all toxic. You're part of the problem. Do people say that sometimes in personal transformation about them? Yes or no? Sometimes.
I think that personal transformation is kind of very like potent. I mean, it's very popular right now, and it's almost like you see the separation between the Democrats and Hillary and Bernie and lots of stuff. And there's so many people that believe it's not worth trying. It's never going to happen. So many people have failed. I've failed personally before,
right.
so nobody's ever going to be able to do it.
So a lot of apathy around this one, right? Now, I love that you're all being very considerate and I'm being like, well, they're unrealistic. Nothing is going to change. But people say some really mean things. Yes or no?
Yeah.
Right? So in that meeting, right, where I'm trying to take care of people, they will say, oh my God. Oh, I'm sorry. What I'll be like, how do you dare you say you want to shut down the bridge where our people are not even taken care of, right? That will be the arguments we will get into. Okay? Now, what do these people, alternative people, think about the change dominant institution people? Debbie?
Get co-opted by the institution.
You're co-opted by the system. Everybody's like, yeah, they're co-opted. What else? What else?
Ethically compromised.
What is it?
Ethically compromised.
Ethically compromise. Oh, you touch power, ew. What else?
Overlord,
What-
master's tools.
What is it?
You can't take apart the master's tools.
That is correct. You use the master tools. How dare you? What else?
Can't change something from the inside
That's right. Can't change something.
if you're on the inside.
Great. Let's take a deep breath, everybody. You never say these things. It's clearly other people, but you heard it because you're there in the meeting trying to be productive and you're like, how dare you say those things? What do these people here say about the people in personal transformation?
Thinking too small.
Thinking too small.
Draining the swamp with a spoon.
What is it?
Draining the swamp with a spoon.
Draining the swamp with a spoon. You're trying to make this little change. Right? You're healing 2 people, but there's 1,000 dying. What else?
We tend to call them neoliberals who believe that everybody should be on this personal journey of
That's
bettering
right.
themselves.
You have never said that before, right?
I say all the time.
Great. This is important. Thank you for your honesty. What about others say? What else do people say? Yes?
That's not going to change the status quo.
That is correct. Look at the belief that he said that. He said that before. I see you from here. We're playing here, but you see. Now, what do these people say about the alternatives people? Change some institutions to alternatives. Yes, Debbie.
Can't create an alternative in capitalism.
Can create alternative capitalism. What else?
Idealistic.
Idealistic. What else?
Well, there's some parts of the dominant institution that are necessary.
Oh, wow. So you don't know differentiate. Oh, wow. This is big. What else?
Small scale.
A small scale. You're never going to grow. This is you. I love you're doing the simple ones. You haven't done the what? It's only for privileged people. There are so many layers of this stuff. Now, let me tell you why this is important. When we're in a meeting, okay, now I tell you again, the awareness is important. That's what we're trying to cultivate together as a team. Awareness of what people are saying, the seasons, and the things that people are saying they're going to do. People are fighting. They're fighting at the bottom because they have a strategic difference. But they don't know how to articulate it. Why? Because culture is implicit. How do I say this? When you're an individual and you're being formed, any of these 3 groupings has one theory that is dominant. And that's the one that you subscribe to. Because either you believe it on your life or because those were the organizers or leaders that brought you in. And because they have that, you have the theory of change. Are you following me in this? But you're never told the theory of change explicitly. You only know it through culture. So what's personal transformation? This is healing space, it's slow down, no activities, and organizers are like, rah! It's all cultural. They're doing with their body and their sayings and their words what is the theory. But for us, because we're movements investigators, we have to go underneath. Okay? So now you get that. Do people fight on these approaches, yes or no? All the time. All the time. So I'm gonna close this with this, then we do that. Then I'll give you some advice per season, if that's okay, and then I'll close for comments and questions. I said to you that there is a training called Movement Ecology Introduction on June, and there's an advanced one that we're doing on the end of the year. My brother Paul and I said my brother, he's not really my brother on blood, but I think we have a commitment to movements for a lifetime, so I think now we're brothers forever. But when Paul and I go back to the history and we look at social movements, once you do the seasons, you can look 10, 15 years, oh, that happened. You notice. You see patterns. Oh, this is that. You begin to see that the conflicts that people had in South Africa, that conversations in the meeting are the same conflicts that people had in Birmingham in the civil rights movement. You begin to see the same conversations they had in Hungary, the same conversations they had in Ecuador. And you're like, how are they having the same problems? The same conflicts. Okay? When people do not understand a strategic difference, then the movement collapses. When people can hold a strategic together, we call that movement ecology. Movement ecology. You see, part of our Western education is that we don't know how to understand difference. Because we don't understand it, we vilify it. It's the same thing with racism. It's the same dynamic of domination. It's our theory, and there you have a different theory. But when Paul and I look at the movements of the last 200 years, and we open up the books, and we go through the movements, we've done this for years now, go through the movements, and you see one example, and you figure out what have been the best movements in the world. You know, like if they do the best hit cities, they would definitely be there. Okay? When you look at the best movements, there is one pattern that they had above everything. One thing, and it's movement ecology. The movement itself knew how to do these three things over and over again. One movement that I'll explain on this is the MST in Brazil, or the MST, right? The MST has a humongous personal transformation process where people, the smallest training is 6 weeks to get initiated. Training for their leaders is 2 months, at least. A whole process of personal transformation within the MST. Okay, humongous. And they, of course, they're part of theology of liberation, all this stuff. Humongous process of you becoming a militante, becoming a person of a lifetime commitment to the movement. Then they have this whole process of doing politics, being in the political parties, they take public office, whole other process to keep doing politics. And then the central course is how they take land and form communities. How many people are familiar with the MSC? Just raise your hands. 1, 2, 3. Important, the MST. 35 years of movement, 1.5 million members. I think it's about 15,000 communities. All that they take in land. They run cooperatives for food. They run their own schools. It's massive. Of course, now they're in attack because of the right wing, right? It's a 35-year-old movement. This helps that. Somebody in the movements, I know it's a controversial figure sometimes, but it's Gandhi. Gandhi is one of the few individuals who has been able to do multiple cycles of movements. It's very interesting to look at the Indian national independence movement. It's so intense because when people read Gandhi, they look at him as be the change you want to see in the world. Yes or no? One part of the theory of change. Then they look at Gandhi as the alternatives. So people remember what alternatives they used to do in India? What was the flag of the movement? The spinning wheel. To make their own cloth. Why? Because the British were taxing the cloth. Right? Selling the cloth to India. They have a whole alternatives program. And then Gandhi went to war with the British colonial power and the Indian national movement multiple times. So people say Gandhi was a political figure. Clearly. Gandhi was an alternative figure. Land distribution, cooperatives. Yes, Gandhi was about change yourself, do meditation, do satyagraha, every tradition. He was in some ways trying to reform Hinduism. That's a religious figure. When these movements work together, the power is insane. Let me tell you why. When we were reading with Paul is crazy. You'll get to meet Paul because I thought I was a movement nerd, but Paul's a bigger nerd. But when Paul and I are checking out the research, and Paul's like, Carlos, look at this stuff. I'm like, Paul, you're crazy. When the movement is going to war, okay, because a movement has to go to war through seasons. Well, who's the first base of the movement? The first leaders. Well, in India was everyone in the alternative. Everyone in the alternative knew that when there will be a national call to go to war against the British Empire, they will be the first bodies on the line. 2, 3, 5, 6,000 bodies. In the US, we don't have a cooperative system where the immigrant movement wants to call for major civil disobedience, and all the cooperative workers in their cooperatives have the right culture that the cooperative is like, it's time for us to go to jail, and everyone wants to jail. We don't have the culture. We don't have movement ecology. Are you following me in this? Because the immigrant movement that is doing this doesn't understand how they need them, and vice versa need them.
Right.
But in the Gandhi, in the logs, we're looking at the logs of the cooperative, the accounting. And in the accounting, there's no accounting for 2 years. And when you look, why is there no accounting in the 2 years? Because everyone was in jail for 2 years. That is what we call the power of movement ecology. And it doesn't mean that everyone has to do the same thing. That's not what we mean. You can have an organization that does more of this. The question is they need to be collaborating. And again, submitting to a larger movement strategy. I help you like this because we're all advancing in a larger issue. And every issue can be addressed in those 3 ways. Take a deep breath, everybody. Talk to the person left and right. What are you learning? What are you getting? What are you reflecting? Go, 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 go. We're about to wrap it up in 15, 20. Before I get into this, in our Western culture, I'm going to bring this all the way back to the beginning, okay? We have this notion that in the spirit, we stop doing our own spirituality to give it to only another person. Somebody else should figure out our spirituality. The priest, the this. Let me externalize that. There's nothing wrong to having somebody who gives you direction and advice. But you have to also do your part. Are you following me in this? We feel sick. We go to the doctor. And the doctor tells us what to do and we follow blindly. We have no awareness of our body. The doctor says, you need surgery. And you just get surgery. You don't have no question about what the doctor to see you 30 minutes will never understand you fully. In the medicine sense. The body's clear. You go to a therapist and the therapist in 30 minutes can die. All your problems cannot be the therapist. You also have to do your work. Why do I say all these things? It's because in the current culture that we have, everything is externalized. You do that for me. You are the expert on that. That's not what we're trying to create an Ayni. We think that in order for us to gain movement capacity, everyone has to have a movement awareness. We have to have debates, we have to talk, some of us are going to specialize in certain areas and others, but we have to all be aware. And it cannot be like, oh, what do you think is the right answer? There got to be at least 6 different good answers. Are you following me on this? That's why everyone has to cultivate the muscle, and that's why in Ayni we believe in craft. So if people are trying to be good at movements, but they don't do their study, they don't do their work, they don't do their readings, they don't do their practice, they're not going to be good. Can you follow me on this? And that's why we have to make the difference between passion and wisdom. It's a humongous step to take that step between passion and wisdom. Just doing it because you feel passionate versus the wisdom of using your passion at the right time. This is what experience and craft gives you. That's why I honor craft and respect craft, and I ask all of you to take that commitment to craft. To the deep study of this. Deep study. I'm telling you this not because no me he quemado las cejas, because my eyes have been burned. My parents can tell you all the stories about my last 17 years. That's what I want for you, because that's what we need for the world to succeed. Okay? No more 1 leaders, we need hundreds. So let me give you my prescriptions as a doctor. Doesn't mean that you understand why I'm giving them to you. Okay? You have to find the answers to yourself. I'm just going to give you some thoughts. Okay? Winter, the hardest season. What to do? Retreats. You have to schedule a retreat.
That's what I was thinking.
Good. A lot of people are anti-retreat. because they have no clue what they're going to do in the retreat. Don't worry. If any of you plans a retreat, maybe we can help you do a little agenda if you need help. But a lot of people are there that can help you do an agenda. Do a retreat. When confused and you cannot solve it in an hour meeting, do a retreat. That's my advice to most people. Do a freaking retreat. In Cosecha, we just did a 6-day retreat. Even my own team that knows that I get them retreating all the time fought me for the 6 days. But the 6th day, we were still needed more time to talk. That's how much retreats are needed. Okay? The civil rights movement had this whole perspective that you talk until you figure out the some meetings lasted 72 hours. You need to talk until you figure it out. Retreats. You have to have trainings by other groups that have gone successfully through their winter. Get training. Which group do you see that has been going through a good winter, and let them to support you, to give you some coaching and support, some love. Right? Now, in a winter, there's some things that need to happen. We'll talk about this in much depth. This is part of the momentum training. People should go to momentum trainings too. It's really important that people do that with the Momentum Institute, which is our sister institute. But when you're creating they're in a winter, right now there's 3 battles for public opinion. First battle is creating awareness of the issue. Second battle is framing the problem. Third battle is framing the solution. They're still in the process where they gotta frame what the problem is. Most people don't know that this is a problem in the public.
Right.
You know, but most people don't know. So in the winter, you have to figure out how to create a narrative so you can increase public awareness on your issue. Are you following me on this?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. You have to build new organizations. At that time, seemed like crazy ideas. Okay? New organizations. I can tell you, I can go through a winter of a movement, and I can tell you whether that movement is going to make it by 2 things. Building new organizations, having narrative, and new people. We need to invest in the leadership development of people most affected by the issue. In the criminal justice field, they're in a spring right now. I can tell you half of that is because there's all these formerly incarcerated, both men and women or others, that are joining in and telling their narratives and training themselves. That is why the movement is at a spring. Okay? How many renters do we need? We need a housing movement. How many immigrant workers? That's what Cosecha is working really hard. Immigrant workers. We need a whole generation of immigrant workers leaders. How the hell are we going to get out of the winter? Just by media? It's not going to happen just by that. We need the people. And the people most affected need to be at the core of it, because they will be the ones that will drive through the whole season. Of course, we need allies. We need supporters. We need them too. We need to develop them too. They need to become leaders too. Okay? Okay. And focus on creating a healthy movement culture. This is really important. If in the winter your culture is toxic, you're not going to last. You have to have some health. Okay? And we should talk more about it, but there is a good group called the Relational Uprising that is also another sister institute that is part of our family. You should go to their trainings too. They're looking at culture very particularly. I think it's an important analysis to do. They come from somatics and also from psychotherapy. There's all this stuff that I think is really important to go deeper into what do we mean by a healthy culture that holds toxicity. Because most people want health, but health is only in relevance to toxicity. So some movements are like, we just want to work. Should I pick up? No, you're good. So most movements work and say, Carlos, our movement is great. We have healthy movement culture. And I say, great. But what if I put a racist in the middle of your group? Does your group have compassion or take them out? Does your group transform them or you kick that person out? That is movement health. It's a capacity to deal with toxicity. You have a man that is patriarchal. Great. Do you have the mechanisms to regulate the man, to help them recognize that he's in wrong and regulate them? You have a person that is anti-black, a person that's anti-immigrant, whatever is the antis. The movement culture is what gets the transformation going. Are you following me in this? If health is just not basing, we don't take those people, then that's not a movement. It's okay. Some people need certain safety and regulation in an organization. But let's just be clear, that's not the movement work. The movement is with individuals that have so many crazy things going on. Is this making some sense? And you go down the line. So that's the hard work of culture. It's spring, growth. In momentum, this whole momentum language, trigger events. I'll just say a couple. One is create absorption mechanism to bring new people in the movement. I'm just going to talk about one, for example. How many of you are running trainings in your organizations? Great. How many of you have a training at least once a month? Okay, great. How many of those trainings are for new people? Very few people. So in the spring, think about this. In the spring, you're having a time where a lot of people want to join your movement, okay? They want to join. But it's hard sometimes to tell them the role, all the things that they need to be the movement, right? So you need to, in the winter, develop the mass training capacity to absorb people through training. And your organization has a training capacity, okay? I'll give you an example, which is something that we at Ayni are always talking about, which is that how many of you feel like facilitation is an important skill for everyone to have in a movement? How many of you think that meetings are bad? Meetings just go to shit, right? Right now, if you want, or if I want to send anyone to facilitation training, where do we send them?
Very few places.
Huh?
I said I'm at facilitation training.
You do facilitation training?
Yeah.
Do we have, but you see, if she's not here, we don't know. Do you do a training once a week?
No.
No. In accounting, I'm not saying it to you particular, but I'm saying as a movement-wide, we don't have the infrastructure to support facilitation. Because we don't know how to match her with people, how to create an institute, how to support your practice, how to get other people, so that we can increase the meeting capacity of the whole movement. Okay? That's the power of mass training. Okay? If we don't have a training a weekend on something, or every month there's a training, it won't happen. Right now in Ayni, we're going to do a training on alternatives next year. Just we want to do one every 3 months and start getting people. I know there's a lot of trainings, but we want to do a whole history of alternatives for the last 200 years. And then we want to do a training on strikes and boycotts. This year is going to happen at the end of the year. There's no other training on strikes. We're going to bring the teachers, we're going to be the prison strikers, everyone together to do a fucking training on strikes. There's no trainings about strikes. No wonder we don't run strikes. Nobody knows how to run strikes. There's no trainings for strikes. Okay, you get the point that I'm saying. Train, curriculum, 3-hour training, 1-day training, 2-day training, all the good stuff. Okay, the only thing that I will share, be careful with getting stuck with legislative deals that don't have enough power yet. When you have spring, people confuse the spring to the summer all the time. In criminal justice, we're just seeing that as well today, where the issue is hot, it's exciting, so people are already compromising, but the movement hasn't built enough power yet. So some people are trying to give compromises to give some of that support, political parties, but you're not there yet. You haven't gone through your summer yet. So be careful with that. Okay? Be careful when you want the fruit. Wanting the fruit is also the right time. Okay? Summer, maximum polarization. Pow, pow, pow. If you're a movement, the summer is a moment of consistent actions on the street, major trigger events. This is all language of social movements we usually go to Momentum to take, to be honest with you. But the important thing for the summer is that in the summer, what I want to say is that if you're actually going through a summer, some movements don't get to this kind of intensity, but if you're going through a summer, you gotta go. You gotta go and get whatever you can. No more the vision is not ready. You go. Because people are going.
Yeah.
And you have to catch. Okay? You got to do more training. You got to be more in the streets. You got to prepare for the madness of the summer. You got to go. No more Carlos, but no, it's fine. You want to carry on the movement, fine. But this movement is going. Right? The Green New Deal is going. We got to go with it. Okay? They prepare, Sunrise prepare as much as they can. They trade, thank you very much. Go! A whole new generation is going to bear from the movement. Go! Now, does every movement have to go through the same season? No. Well, you go through summer, I go through winter, and I prepare for your cycle. Movement of movements is a coordination of seasons. Okay? Summer. Okay, now this is too intense. This is based on other theories. Fall is a harvest. Okay? Either victory or failure has been achieved. This is an important thing. Get activists to take breaks and do reflection process. Do not criticize the last season of the movement. Be appreciative. You see, the problem here is that people are think about this, okay? Think about the craziness. You're in a winter, work your booty off. You planted your seeds, you struggled with your team for 4 years, and you hit a spring. And you're like, yes, spring. And then you work through your spring, and then summer, and like, summer, and you go, protest on the street, war, you negotiate. All these people are joining you, yes or no? Somebody new shows up every day. And their perspective, they have no clue that you went through the winter, they just think the summer is the movement. The summer is all it is. If there's no summer, there's no movement. People have that perception. So what happens? Things begin to fall apart. The strategy maybe collapses. You get some victories, some failures. Maybe the movement doesn't get everything it could get into a cycle. Because to be honest with you, real liberation takes multiple cycles. But most people don't understand that. Okay? They want everything. They're like, abolishment of prisons. Yeah, go to one cycle. Maybe in the next two you can figure that out. It takes a couple cycles. It takes 45 years, 50 years. That's how change happens. Right? So it's like, be appreciative. By that I mean it's like, if you're a new activist or you're joining in the summer, please be appreciative of the people who have been there for the last 8 years. And when things fall apart, be appreciative and then be like, what can we do to support the movement in this stage? Isn't that the right thing to do? Some respect to your elders that have been in the movement at least for 8 years, right? So the fall is a particular time because people feel like things are falling apart, but they don't know how to say it. So then they put whatever they think is the right thing. So they're falling is because of this organization. Or they're falling apart is because of this strategy. Some of it is true, but it's not that personal. It's a holistic thing. It's a whole generation that is taking a break. Okay? And the last thing that I will share is just tell the story of the movement for a new generation. You have to tell the mistakes and the greatnesses of every season. We owe that to the future. Okay? Share the story. We made a mistake here. That's okay. We got to learn from it. But we don't want a new generation to come back and go through a winter and think that they're going to redo the same thing you did. And that's what happens most of the times. That's it. I finished my presentation.